Morning, y'all. As you can hear, I definitely did do a lot of screaming last night after watching SummerSlam. But I'm gonna be real with you. It was really difficult to stay awake. I started passing out around the second hour, and I did my hardest to stay awake. Plus, the feed for some reason kept going into a loop, and it kept shutting off, and I just had feed issues like every live pay per view for some reason. But anyway, what I am going to do is instead of going back, and I'm gonna probably go back and watch the Shinsuke match and the main event. I did see how it started, and I did see the middle of it, but I didn't see the outcome. But I saw the outcome on Twitter, so I'm just gonna go over my own personal opinion on who won and whether or not I thought it was a good thing. Honestly, I I'm alright with Shinsuke winning. Well, not Shinsuke. I'm okay with Jinder winning. I kind of knew that he was because they're still trying to capitalize in India, so it doesn't necessarily make any sense for Shinsuke to actually take the title. And if he does, it's gonna probably be towards WrestleMania, and I'm fine with that. I am absolutely 100% okay with that. And as for Lesnar retaining, I wanted Samoa Joe. It would make more sense to have Samoa Joe, but the fact that that Lesnar knew ahead of time who was going to win, that kind of let me know also that Lesnar was going to retain the title. So I'm not really so beat up about that either. Um, but as for the match, I heard it was like one of the best main events of the entire show. I really don't know that because I didn't see it all the way through. I literally fell asleep. It was getting too hard to stay awake. 6 hours of wrestling, a bit too much. Then 2 hours last night of NXT, which I actually did do a review, and I will put it up when I can. I did it before SummerSlam, so my intro is going to be a little off. But other than that, this was somewhat average, but had a lot of good moments. I'm just going to say that. The pay per view as a whole kind of started off with a dud. In my opinion, I didn't care much for Baron Corbin versus Cena. It was definitely one sided. We all know why. That's because he was a Twitter bully, so he ended up getting punished for it, which makes no sense to me because he's a heel. But if you mess with WWE's money, or if you mess with Dave Meltzer, you're gonna go down. That's pretty much what it is. But other than that, I have to say that the pre-show probably was maybe had the best matches on the card. Oh well, not the card, but the pre-show actually had the best matches. You had the Usos versus the New Day on the pre-show when it should have been on the main card, and you should have taken out Big Show versus Big Cass. That had really no need to be there at all. Um, but I love that match. That match actually was pretty good. I give mad props to the New Day for dressing as villains, but being baby faces. They dressed up as the Red Lantern Corps. The Red Lantern Corps is like the immortal enemy of the Green Lanterns, and I think that they actually practice blood magic. So yeah, that's the polar opposite of what a baby face should be. But I gotta give mad props to him for that. And I guess Seth Rollins kind of followed suit because he wore the same thing, all red. But other than that, man, the pre-show actually was pretty good, except for the mismatch. It was kind of out of place, and Jason Jordan being there. Yeah, you have your son debut in a pre-show. Yeah, thanks, Dad. But other than that, about the main card, there was one match that I consider the most disappointing match of the night, and that was the SmackDown Women's Championship match, and it's always a dud. There hasn't been a time that the SmackDown Women's Championship match has been like the greatest. Never. Ever since that belt came to be, they have always shafted that belt. And it really pissed me off last night how Natalya won. Not because the fact Natalya did win. Well, okay, there's two problems with that. Number one, it made it feel like a consolation prize because she hasn't won in 6 years. And in my humble opinion, it shouldn't be about how long you got there. It should be, number one, how big of a draw you are, and number two, well, of course, if you can make money, and number three, how that individual carries the belt. There's no doubt in my mind that Natalya will carry it like a queen. But the problem is that match was one of the worst matches she's ever been in her entire career. I've seen 5 stars coming from her, and she dumbed it down for Naomi. That's not what you should do. You should literally give it your all and make her work for it. Naomi is good. She's athletic, but she's not as good technical. And she needs to literally up her A game so she can learn a little bit more. And Natalia's match was a dud. It was a complete dud, and her win was just nothing. It was a whimper, in my opinion. I've seen better matches coming out of her, and that match was just far pathetic and completely useless. If you want to make your champion look good, then you have a match against an opponent where she has to fight for it. And Naomi, I'm sorry, that sharpshooter, she barely sat on her. She barely put enough pressure on her back for her to tap out. They've been trying to get that belt off Naomi or find a reason to for a very long time, and that was the worst way to do it. I'm sorry. They could have done their best to actually make Naomi look good, but they did not. They made her look like a chump than a champ. And as for Natalya, she should have had a better match. And it was a pathetic match for her. It was low caliber for her. So her win, yay. So what? She hasn't had it in 6 years. She's had a championship reign. She was a Divas champ. She was a champion at one time. She didn't have a championship for long, but more than likely, if they give you the championship and you're as old as her and been there as long as she has, she's on her way out. And she wants to be the champ before she leaves. So I'm hoping that at WrestleMania, she's going to have a decent match before she retires. I'm just saying. We had a total of 7 belts that changed hands. We had 2 on NXT TakeOver, and we had 5 last night. Wow. I'm shocked of how many belts changed hands, but you know the ones that made the most money didn't change hands at all. They kept it on AJ, which I think was smart. They kept it on Jinder, which was very expected, and they kept it on Lesnar, which I didn't really know much about Lesnar. I wasn't sure whether or not Lesnar was leaving, and I did count him out. But the fact that he is not going to be leaving till next year, which makes more sense because he's going to wait for his contract to run out so he doesn't have to go to Vince to go back to UFC. So I think that that's the smartest move. So now that Lesnar has the title, it's going to mean even more leading on up to WrestleMania. So in a way, that makes sense, and I'm cool with that. But then you have the tag team titles that changed hands, Raw tag team titles that changed hands. Duh, because they made such a big deal about this Shield reunion. Then you had the both women's titles that changed hands. I didn't really expect Natalya, but I expected Sasha. That was my highlight of the whole night. Sasha Banks versus Alexa Bliss. Highlight of the whole night. Seeing Sasha win her first pay-per-view. Even though she didn't look happy coming out, maybe she trolled the crowd, I'm happy. I'm really happy. Because that means they're going to start the feud between her and Bayley when Bayley heals up. So honestly, I'm looking forward to it. I really am, because it's going to be a really great match. And then you had those 2 titles that changed hands. And then you had the Cruiserweight title that changed hands. The only title, and that was against Neville and Tozawa. I don't know why they did that, man. Because it didn't make any sense for Tozawa to win on Raw and then to have Neville win on the pay-per-view. You're doing the exact same thing that you did with Sasha and Charlotte. Why? But other than that, the IC belt wasn't even defended. So you have the IC belt, the US title, and the 2 main belts, the 2 brand belts that did not change hands. So I'm fine with that. That was still interesting, though. But it was still somewhat average SummerSlam. Yep, guys, that title was no joke. I absolutely waited 4 days to finish the rest of this review. I was exhausted, as you can hear. Right after SummerSlam, I was screaming my lungs out. But I actually had a chance to go back, watch the WWE Championship match, as well as the US title match. And I also went back to see the main event. That main event, though. But let's talk about, really briefly, the US title match. It was very good. Very good all around. I have to say that match was probably the next best match of the night. Now, I know I didn't mention Cesaro. Cesaro is definitely Chief. He's the MVP of SummerSlam after tearing up that freaking beach ball. And I will do a video on that, and it's not going to be pretty. But other than that, That match was really great when it came to the storytelling, when it came to the psychology, when it came to the all-around chemistry with both people in the ring, and it wasn't that much Shane. Everyone says too much Shane. It wasn't that much Shane. Shane was involved, but in a good way, telling a story. So he was absolutely fine for me. And also, it leads to the feud between him and Kevin Owens, and I think it was told very well, and I love the outcome. And I'm happy that they did keep it on AJ, like I said before previously. Now, when it comes to the actual WWE Championship match against Jinder Mahal versus Shinsuke Nakamura, that was the worst match of the night. Now, I did say the women's match was the worst match of the night. That's the second worst. And these are championship matches, which is no excuse. Shinsuke did all he could in that match to carry it. But unfortunately, Jinder is incredibly slow. He is slow as freaking molasses, and it's really difficult for him to have chemistry with anybody he wrestles with, which is a problem when you're a champion. Now, Shinsuke did everything he could to carry that match, and that's the reason why, in my humble opinion, they put the Singh brothers in there, because the audience was starting to fall asleep. It was getting pretty boring. Now, I know it had the exact same outcome as the feud that he had with Randy Orton, but I know why they did it, to wake the crowd up. I'm sorry, Jinder Mahal cannot carry a match. He can't, and he can't keep up either. When you have somebody as agile and as quick as Shinsuke, as well as him using strong style and being a really swift and strong striker, you have to have something to back that up, or at least balance it out, and Jinder does not have that. He is slow as molasses, and that's why that match was boring. That's why Shinsuke was being a little bit flamboyant with every single move he did, and kind of exaggerated everything he did to keep the crowd awake. But Jinder just couldn't keep up, and that's why the match was bad. It was just because Jinder just didn't have any chemistry with Shinsuke, and he did not know how to make the match work. That's why it was bad, at least in my opinion. Now, the main event, though. That main event, though. Man, I never had more laughs in my life and enjoyed a match so much. But don't get me wrong, it had that lag towards the very end. But Braun Strowman is the next MVP of the freaking night. Oh my gosh. Braun Strowman, I laughed so hard when he threw a chair at Samoa Joe. I could not stop laughing that whole night. He was like, boop, and he just hit Joe in the head. He just fell back. I laughed so hard. That was one of my best moments, to actually see Braun Strowman throw a chair at Samoa Joe. That was the highlight of my night. But yeah, it got slow. It really did get slow. Now, I know a lot of people think that somehow the Beast got his butt handed to him. Let's be honest. Braun Strowman is now a credible threat against Brock Lesnar, which I think is a really good thing, because Brock Lesnar for years has been known as the unstoppable beast. He's been known as the beast incarnate. Now you have somebody that can literally go toe-to-toe with him and look like a threat. Great idea. Great way to book Braun Strowman. Now, like I said, I don't know why Roman was in there, but then after hearing a bunch of stories, they're trying to rebuild him up and make him an underdog. It's still not going to work. But regardless of that, the MVP of that match definitely was Braun Strowman. But the one big flaw of having a fatal four-way is that there's always going to be at least one or two people lost in the shuffle. Roman Reigns was definitely one of those guys that was lost in the shuffle that nobody really cared about, and he kept trying to make himself seen, but no one still cared. And then you had Samoa Joe, who always has been the MVP, at least in my opinion, and then you ended up having him being he kept trying to choke everybody out, but he just kept getting lost in the shuffle. And that's kind of bad for a fatal four-way. That's why I wish it was one-on-one, and we're going to get that at No Mercy between the Beast and the Beast Among Men, which is what I'm really looking forward to. That's going to be probably one of the best matches of the freaking night. But I'm not sure if I actually remember on my review that I did not talk about Randy Orton versus Rusev. That match was the most disappointing, because the fact you thought that Rusev was going to come out looking like a freaking chief, and he had his butt handed to him in 10 freaking seconds. I'm not thrilled about that at all. And if he actually does want his release, I don't blame him. They have been booking him poorly, and he's done nothing wrong. And of course, like I said, Randy Orton has pretty much had his people think he's had his credibility shot. In my humble opinion, he doesn't. John Cena has lost matches before, but he did to put people over. Randy Orton is not the type of guy to put people over unless you pay him, and they did not pay him enough to have that happen. They didn't pay him enough to put over to Rusev. So I kind of had a feeling that Rusev was going to lose, because there was no way he was going to lose again with that horrible, horrible, horrible feud that he had with Bray Wyatt. That's not going to ever make it up, as well as losing to Jinder Mahal twice. So other than that, I knew that they had to pay him a buttload of money for him to put over Rusev, and that never happened. So I kind of expect Randy to do that. So that's really no shock. But I am hoping that Rusev leaves. If this keeps up, his credibility is going to be shot. So I kind of understand if he really does want to leave, but at this point, it's just a rumor. But other than that, guys, my true overall thoughts of SummerSlam is this. This SummerSlam was not top notch. It was not by any means, but it was average. The reason why I say that is because you can honestly see this on an episode of Raw. And I'm just being real. You can see matches like this on an episode of Raw. They had a lot of failed ones, and they had a lot of great ones. The main event was really great. It was amazing to see Sasha Banks win her first pay-per-view ever, a big 4 at that. But the SmackDown Women's title was a complete bore, and it was terrible, and it just didn't really go well because that match was not of Natalya's caliber. And also the fact that you had the WWE Championship match, which should have been better. They had a really great international appeal, but unfortunately, it just fell flat because Jinder could not keep up with Shinsuke. And I had a feeling that was going to happen. Then you had this impromptu match when it had 0 people in the crowd at the beginning of the pre-show. All these freaking empty seats. And you got The Miz literally being seen on the far corner when you got nobody there. Yeah, I laughed at that. I thought that was very, very funny, because you would think production would know better. You think the production would cut off just when he takes the belt out inside the ring to make sure you don't see the empty seats around. But everybody knows it's already out there. But other than that, guys, that's my thought of SummerSlam. This pay-per-view did not feel like a Big 4. It felt like an episode of Raw. It just did. But I want to hear your thoughts. Leave in the comments below. Let me know how you feel, and I'll talk to you later. Peace out.